to Networking Not Working, the third live webinar in the series. And I hope we had a great week and have been using all the things we discussed in weeks 1 and 2. Today we're going to be covering probably one of the most fun elements of getting to know people, and also one of the most useful as well. Definitely a great tool in your box once you've grasped the essentials of it. It's basically all about how do you go about building quick rapport with people. What is it that enables some people to walk up to someone they've never met before and within seconds almost be laughing and joking as if they've known each other for ages? What is it that they do that's different perhaps to certainly what I used to do, which was walk up very nervously, wonder if the person is thinking what they're thinking about me, how I'm coming across. Very self-conscious basically is how I used to be, and there are still occasions where I have to remind myself that actually nobody's really that interested in you as an individual. They have their own things going on in their own minds, and it's all about how can you tap in and tune in to their wavelength. So that's what we're going to be covering today. It's really all about your networking style. So what is your networking style? Well, there are plenty of personality profiling tools out there, but I've seemed to have been drawn to one that's very simple, very easy to understand, and we talk about some characters in the book that help you really tune into what is your natural preference, your natural networking style. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions, and then maybe you can decide which one's most like you, which one is closest to how you behave when you're just acting naturally, feeling comfortable, and working or talking in a way that is totally unself-conscious. So the first question is, are you more outgoing or are you more reserved? Are you more extrovert or are you more introverted? And again, if that's if it's 51%, 49%, doesn't matter. I'm not going to put you in a box. Just decide very quickly which of those you are. And then the second question to ask yourself is, if you've got something to do you prefer to just get your head down and crack on with it? Or are you someone who prefers to work with people and are naturally thinking, right, who do I need to work with on this to make it happen? Do you like being in and around people? Is that your sort of natural environment? Or do you prefer to be in more quiet or more solitary confines, if you like, to get on with the things that you want to do in life? Do you have a large natural network, or do you have a fairly close defined natural network? Those are the sort of things that might help you decide, are you more task focused or people focused? Okay, what we'll end up with now is you will be in one of 4 natural networking styles most of the time. So this is just your preference. So your preference may be, for example, to be fairly outgoing and very task focused. So you would be closest to the character we call Richard Red in the book. That's somebody who's dynamic and straightforward, gets to the point very quickly, likes to drive through and complete tasks, and yeah, it's just one of those natural go-getters, the people that they don't like hanging around. They're not really interested in long-winded explanations. So in fact, I'm going to stop there. Richard Reds, that's you if you're more naturally outgoing and task focused. If you're outgoing and people focused, you're going to be very much like Yasmin Yellow, who's our extreme yellow character in the book. So very outgoing, flamboyant, enthusiastic, big smiles, big hugs for everyone, and one of those people that generally brings the light into the room when they arrive. Just fantastic, outgoing, bubbly people that everybody is drawn to and loves. Now, what I'm explaining or what I'm describing here are real extremes, but it's just so that we can easily differentiate between the 4 different sorts of people. So Yasmin Yellows we've covered. Now, what if you're more reserved. And again, we can split those between task and people focused. Let's start with the people focused people. So they are reserved and people focused. In the book, we've called that character Gulab Green. And these are people who are, they're very friendly, but they go about that in a quieter way than the Yasmin Yellows of the world. So they're very loyal. They're very concerned about other people, and they are then they're nature's helpers, if you like. They're very nurturing in their style, quieter in their approach, and generally they're the glue. So when you're putting a team together, they're the glue that holds everybody together, is very concerned about how people are feeling and how they are engaging in a process or an activity. So that's our Gulab Greens, as again, very extreme examples. Now, the final of the four characters is someone who's introverted, but very task focused. Now, this character in the book is called Bill Blue, and Bill is a very reserved character, very cautious, very much focused on the quality of outcomes rather than the quantity. Very good at having one-to-one conversations, and really likes to dig down and understand what's the heart of problems, and likes to consider their responses before they'll commit, if you like. So very task focused as well, loves the detail, likes to get in and under the skin of issues, and will work until the job is done, if you like, until they've got a good quality outcome. So that's our Bill Blues. Now, what's interesting about each of those preferences is that what I've just described are people at the very extreme. So people who are maybe they're demonstrating 100% of that energy. So Richard Red, 100% dynamic and forceful and driven, and perhaps a bit curt now and again. And, that would be 100% red with no qualifying yellow, green or blue energy. The reality is we're all a bit of a mixture. Now, that's not a cop-out. We still have strong preferences, and those preferences will lead us maybe with one or two key energies that we present most of the time, or it could be that we have one extreme and a few supporting ones. And sometimes individuals will have no preference at all, and they will have quite a balanced profile, or they'll have quite extreme profiles where they've got a high level of red and yellow energy, for example, and almost no blue energy out of preference. Now, I keep coming back to that word preference here, because the reality is we're all 100% of all of the energies. So at any time, you can pull from within you the energy to be more yellow and flamboyant and enthusiastic. You can also, if that's not your natural preference, you can pull out 100% blue energy and really get focused on the details if required. So we're not talking about competence here. We're not saying that if you're have a very strong yellow preference that you can't do the detail activities of somebody with a strong blue preference. It's just that doing those activities won't make you happy. So those of you who've decided you're probably closer to Yasmin Yellow than a Bill Blue, you'll know what I mean when I say that doing your tax return at the end of the year is definitely more of a chore than a joy in your life, and vice versa. Those of you who are very much aligned to that Bill Blue character rather than the Yasmin Yellow, I would say that one of your biggest nightmares would be walking into a room full of people with the mission of meeting as many of them as possible and getting involved in lots of conversations. So it doesn't really matter what your preferences are. It's just being aware of what that means when you are involved in various situations where you're meeting people and building relationships. Because if you stick to your own preference, it's very likely you won't always get the best results when building quick connections with others. And that's what I want to explore today. The reality is, despite the fact that I've started here with a description of the 4 preferences, the reality is it really doesn't matter what your preference is. What matters is how effectively you pull on your other energies when presented with an individual that has a preference that's different to yours. So let me explain what I mean by that. Let's say that you are somebody with a high green preference, so a quiet demeanor, someone who very comfortable in close-knit one-to-one type conversations, and but you're now meeting somebody who dynamically joins that circle, introduces themselves as Richard Red, and they want to know your name, and they would like to know your number, and ideally they'd like to get all that done in 30 seconds and be gone. That's the impression that you're getting. Now, if you stick to your own preference, it's very likely that you'll be a bit put off by their driving nature, and you might be a bit concerned about joining in a conversation with this individual because they don't seem to be very personable, which is one of your principles, if you like, that one of your values, that you like to make others feel comfortable, whereas this individual seems more keen on driving for a result. So if you stick to your own preference, it's very likely that Richard's now going to feel a little bit unnerved in your presence. And actually what your aim is when you're networking is to build some quick connections, establish some rapport, help the other individual get to know you in a way that's very comfortable for them, not for you, but for them. So with this individual, you need to draw on your red energy, be more outgoing, be more direct, and say, hello, my name is Gulab. In the book, the character Gulab Green. Hello, my name's Gulab. It's lovely to meet you. I can see you're in a bit of a rush. So what is it you specifically want right now? And then let's make sure we get together very soon and catch up properly. So what you're doing is you're drawing on your own red energy to make that connection and tune in to what it is that Richard wants. So he's looking for a result, he's looking for a quick decision, and he's looking to get out of here. Excuse me. So how can you help him is what should be going through your mind. So it's back to that whole principle that we discussed in the first webinar. How can you help the other individual? Well, the way you can help individuals when you're trying to make quick connections is tune into their wavelength. Find out exactly how they like to converse and how they like to make those initial, make that initial dialogue happen. And basically, if you do that, then they feel like they've just met someone they can connect with. So let me explain that as well in a way that will help you understand that this is not about being it's not about not being genuine. So there's lots of knots in there, wasn't there? It's not about being fake. It's about retaining your integrity. Because you have access to 100% of all of these energies, you can adapt your networking style to tune into others. So the way we think about that is if I have a low level in terms of preference of red and yellow energy, but I go into a room that's filled with people with lots of red and yellow energy, what I have to do is expand the access to my yellow and red energy and use more of it. So be bigger, be more expressive, be the type of person that can fit in naturally in a room with lots of extroverted people. So it will be noisier, it will be quicker in terms of pace of conversation. There'll be more sort of infectious laughter. There will be more straightforward conversations and a lot more movement perhaps than there would be in a room full of lots of green and blue energy. So if my natural preference is green and blue energy, I need to break out of that tap into my yellow energy and my red energy and get out there and make those connections in a much easier way. Now, the opposite could be true. What if I walk into a room filled with lots of green and blue energy, and I have a preference for all that yellow and red energy we were just talking about? Well, again, I need to tap into my own blue and green energy and play down the yellow and red energy. So now I'm quieter, I'm more purposeful, I'm potentially a little bit slower in the way I'm communicating. I'm thinking about things in lots of different ways that will appeal to people that they maybe thrive on words, they maybe thrive on one-to-one connections and conversations. So there's lots of things I can do now to change my natural preference and change my style so that I'm bringing it, I'm lowering the energy around the red and yellow, and I'm inflating the energy around blue and green. So it's all my energy though. So those of you who are into science know that you can't destroy energy. Energy just changes. And that's all you're doing. You're tapping into your vast pool of red, yellow, green, and blue energy and adapting it in your way to the individual that you're talking to. So what I wanted to do in the second half of this webinar is talk to you about what this means in practice, because I don't mind models and theories, but actually I'm a very pragmatic person, and sometimes when I walk into a room, I'd like to know what I'm supposed to be doing, if you like, to make better connections, because that's our intention, isn't it? We're going to a networking event, we're going to a party, we're going to a conference, we're going somewhere where we're going to meet people, and we want to make good connections. We want to forge new relationships, not just from a professional networking perspective, but because it enhances our life. It makes life worth living, if you like, if you are building great relationships wherever you go. So I'm going to share with you some 4 words, if you like, that will help you think about what you might need to change as you are building your rapport with others and utilizing your networking style. So the tool that I use, and the profiling tool that I use, is called Clarity 4D. And I'd like to share with you the 4 Ds of building rapport. So, and what's great about some of this stuff is it's just common sense. So let me say you walk into a room and you're fully suited and booted, got your tie on, and you walk into a room and everybody there is much less formal than you. Maybe you didn't see the invitation with the semi-casual dress code, but you've walked in with a suit and tie. So you've now got a choice. You can either decide, I want to stand out, I want to be the person that everybody's looking at, and actually that might work to my benefit, in terms of some people might be attracted to the fact that there's somebody dressed a bit differently and come and have a chat. Or you can choose, if you want to build quicker rapport with people, you can choose to loosen your tie, or maybe even take your tie off, take your jacket off, maybe roll your sleeves up. You can choose to blend in. Now that's something that we know would make sense. But in terms of our 4 Ds of building rapport, that's the first one. It's the dress. It's how are you dressed? And if you're dressed in a way that fits in naturally with others, then you know that actually they're going to feel more comfortable with you in their presence. So that's the first D in terms of attending events and wanting to build quick rapport with people. So the second is your demeanor. And what I mean by that is, if you're in a conversation with some people that are very enthusiastic, very smiley, and they're very energetic in their conversations, big gestures, and you know, in general, lots of red and yellow energy. That's what I'm talking about. Then to build quick rapport with that group, again, you have to decide, you're making a decision. Do you stand there and stick to your preference, which may be, let's say, for example, maybe very blue, which is very confined and very compact. You might have a preference for standing with your arms folded. You might have a preference for standing with your hands in your pockets, and just generally giving the impression that you are more reserved than everybody else. Now, again, that will be fine on some levels. There will be some people that will observe that in this room of lots of energy, and will come over and say, "Hey, come on, come and join in, and come and meet John," whatever. So there are some individuals that will be very attentive to you if you're standing there and keeping inside your own preference. However, if you choose to break out of that and access your red and yellow energy and be more expressive, be a bit louder in your conversation, laugh a bit more, lighten up a little bit. And I don't mean that in any sort of derogatory way. The nice thing about all these preferences is they're all absolutely wonderful. But in terms of the impression that you're giving other people, if you can break out of that natural blue preference and be more expressive, and make, you know, have more gestures, shake people's hands vigorously, pat them on the back in the middle of a conversation, just observe how the people around you are behaving, and see if you can just tap into that and do your own version of that. This is not about you acting. This is not about you being someone that you're not. You have to absolutely retain 100% authenticity. You have to be you, but it's just you in the knowledge that you can tap into that red and yellow energy and be more vivacious, if you like, in that conversation. So, excuse me, that's the second D of building rapport. The third one is dialogue. So we've talked about how you're dressed. We've talked about your demeanor. The third is around dialogue. How do you prefer to communicate with others? Are you that person who's very expressive, very very wordy? You have lots of things and issues and ideas, lots of opinions that you like to express, and you like to make your point, you like to be heard, and you like to really express yourself in a way that's unequivocal. Okay, now what happens when you bump into someone on the train platform who is obviously, by their dress maybe, and maybe their demeanor, they are much more reserved than you? So again, you have that choice. Do you stick to your own preference and be quite loud from their perspective and be potentially off-putting because that's who you are, isn't it? Or do you recognize that that's just your preference, your communication preference, and decide instead that you will tap into your green energy, which is introverted but very people focused, and find a way of communicating that is potentially lower in volume, definitely will be less confrontational and less assertive. Doesn't mean to say they can't get results, by the way, but it just means that they go about that in a very different way. So you can tune in slower conversation, a much more intimate, from your perspective, a much more intimate conversation, and talk about things that maybe would normally not really interest you. Again, it's not because you're trying to be someone else, but it's just recognizing what's going to help that person to make a quicker and better connection with you. So the third D then is the dialogue, and the fourth D is departure. Now, again, it's tapping into your own personal networking style, and your networking style is made up of all those preferences. It has lots of red energy available to you, lots of yellow, lots of blue, and lots of green. But what are you going to deploy when you are departing from a conversation, or from a party, or from from an interaction, maybe a big meeting? Well, again, are you going to stick to what makes you feel comfortable, your own preference, or are you instead going to reflect the conversation you just had, or reflect the atmosphere that you've just been operating in? So again, let's go back to that very noisy, lots of red and yellow energy party that you were attending. You've done a great job. You've risen to the task, if you like, of expressing yourself very clearly, potentially louder, and you've joined in the jokes, and you've really pushed yourself out of your comfort zone, but still being you, just you with lots of red and yellow energy. Now, when you leave, if you stick to your natural preference, which may be blue or green if you're introverted, then it's very likely that your preference would be to make a quiet exit, almost so that nobody notices. But actually, the people that are there will notice, and they'll start to question that you enjoyed yourself. They'll wonder whether you whether they've said something, if you like, that that made you want to leave so quickly. Now, being people that have lots of red and yellow energy as a preference, they won't worry about them, they won't dwell on that for long. But if you leave according to your own preference, rather than leaving on a high note, if you like, with people with lots of red and yellow energy, then you are actually breaking that connection that you've just done a lot of good work to make. So leave on a similarly light and energetic way. Right, guys, I'll see you. Fantastic time. And Janet, let's make sure we get on the phone tomorrow. See you all next time. So what you're doing is leaving in a very authentic way. It's just you being more extroverted, but you're helping them recognize that you are somebody that is definitely on their wavelength. That's the key. You're always trying to be on others' wavelengths. You're not trying to be somebody different. You're tuning into their wavelength such that they feel really comfortable with you. Now, if you're going to depart from a one-to-one meeting with somebody with lots of blue energy, a big hug and a big wave is not going to do it. They're going to think, well, hold on, didn't we have intention to meet up in 2 weeks' time? We don't have any details. I'm not sure. How am I going to contact you? What's going to be the information that I need between now and then that you'd like me to bring? So to make them comfortable, tune into their wavelength, lower the red and yellow energy, enhance the blue energy, and sit down and go through some details and shake hands and say, it's been lovely to meet you, Bill, and I'll look forward to a week next Tuesday, getting back together and going through those documents that we discussed. So the departure is just as important as the connection on that very first occasion that you meet up. Now, over time, what's lovely about networking styles is people blend their networking styles over time. So you'll know from your own personal relationships how you can be with somebody, a really close friend who has a completely opposite preference and style to you. And over time, you sort of come together. So if you're extroverted, they become a little bit more extroverted when they are with you. If they are very people focused, and most of their conversation is focused on the people and the joint friends that you have, you'll find that over time, even though that is not necessarily something that you would always talk about, you're very happy to talk about those sorts of things with this individual. So that blending happens over time, but it does take time. Initially, it's about meeting people on their wavelength so that you can blend in a lovely way that makes them feel comfortable, and then they are more likely to start to tune into your natural preferences too. So you're just giving them that opportunity to be more blended in terms of their approach as well. So I hope that's been useful. That's the end of this webinar. Next week, we're going to talk about bringing all those skills into a networking environment. So in the book, we call it Working the Room, and the 5 simple steps that will dramatically improve your ability to make great connections and start to get value for money, if you like, out of all the networking events that you go to. So I look forward to seeing you here again next week. Have a great week. Go and have fun with this. This is a great tool to go and play with. You'll have thought during the webinar about people that you know and how close they are to some of those extreme characters we talked about. So go and have fun. Enjoy yourselves. Have a fabulous week, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.